Please note that today's episode contains discussion about abortion, trauma, and ministry related to women in these crisis situations.
We are Vineyard.
Somos Viña.
We are Vineyard.
I thought about it every day. Women say that go through the group that has been 20 years, that they think about it every day. And these are successful women and women who you would be surprised to know the women who've stepped out after 20 years and felt like they had to get this dark out of their heart. But I just feel like it's a place that Jesus wants to touch and heal, because you know that your heart is broken for your baby that you didn't have. We need that. We all need that. As believers, we need those healing times.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, our host Jay Pathak talks to Diane Bauman. Diane is the pastor of Value Life at Vineyard Columbus. Let's listen in.
Well, thanks for joining me for this.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
You're on the verge of sabbatical.
I am, yeah.
Super exciting. We were joking earlier, it's 6 weeks, which in Europe we call a vacation. That's not. Not.
I'm just like, I wish it was vacation, but yeah. Since I've been here so long, though, I do get that much. I just never take that much time. So
that's so funny. Well, and how long have you been at the Columbus Vineyard?
So I've been on staff for 23 years, and we've been coming here since 28 years. So
29 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's incredible. And I think, did you say earlier it was 95?
When we started coming, like January of 95.
January of 95. So I would have been just before you.
Well, because my daughter, Sarah, and her husband, Luke Duckworth, were in your small group, and they tell the story about you taking them to Blockbuster in Westerville and saying, talk to people.
Yeah.
Jesus. And Sarah is kind of is a very introverted, and she was like freaked out about it. So when she came home that night, she was like, oh my gosh.
I remember we prayed. I think that was the time we prayed for someone in a wheelchair.
Yes.
I remember that. Yeah. Well, because I thought, we're talking about this stuff. We should probably try it at some point. I remember that vividly.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we start this kind of where your story starts, which is where you were born and where you grew up. I'd love to hear your whole story.
Okay. I was born in Columbus in a hospital, but I lived in Johnstown, which is about, 20 minutes from here, from Westerville, like northeast. I think you probably know where that is.
I know exactly where it is.
Yeah. And so I grew up there and went to school, graduated from there in 1976. But I went to a Presbyterian church in Johnstown until I was 37, until we came to Vineyard. And then I came to know the Lord at the Presbyterian Church at a lay witness weekend, November 23rd, 1974, which is kind of interesting. The Presbyterian church that we invited to come, the lay witness people were from Outville Presbyterian Church, and they did a gospel call, and I'd never experienced that before. I grew up, and it was this great liturgical church, and I was real connected with the kids in the youth group, and I loved the youth leader and all that. But that night, the second night of the lay witness weekend, they called it, all the youth were sitting in the back row of the sanctuary, and where you sit. But somehow I made it to the front and up to where the altar is. And I gave my life to the Lord. And my circumstances didn't change. So I should switch back a little bit and talk about when I was in high school. I met with their class and we dated, and he was the center on the basketball team and the quarterback on the football team. So like the jock, was really good. And I was really good academic, that 4.0, that kind of thing. But I got pregnant between my freshman and sophomore year I had a baby. I got pregnant. I had the baby in my freshman and sophomore year during the summer. I had him July 2nd. And, I went right back to marching band and right back to school. So I'm the second of 6 children, and my parents were both employed, and it was a busy household. So I was able to hide the pregnancy pretty well, and loose tops were pretty popular then. Like
wait. So you're pregnant. You're pregnant.
I do.
Your family doesn't know you're pregnant.
No.
And you're just going to press through. I'm not going to let anybody know. And you're 15?
15. Yeah.
Wow.
So my boyfriend knew, of course, but so one Saturday morning, my mom woke me up and said, "Get up, we're going to go to the doctor." And so I was like, "Oh, she's pregnant." But we went, and I was 7.5 months pregnant, and the doctor, it was our family doctor that we had gone to forever. And he quickly made an appointment at the Riverside OB clinic. And I went there. Well, that was on Saturday. So I went there on Tuesday. And I was dropped off there by my boyfriend's sister. She just dropped me off and said she'd be back later. And when they were examining me, I hemorrhaged. So, there was lots of scurrying around, lots of doctors in and out. And they said, "Who are you here with?" And I said, "Well, nobody right now." So they called my mom and said, "We're going to have to take the baby. We think we can save Diane. We don't know if we'll be able to save the baby." And they were almost sure that they wouldn't be able to, but they did. But I went through labor and delivery. I went into labor right then and there, but I all by myself. So I felt like I didn't have anybody, and the nurses were amazing. That they were like, "We're here for you. We'll do whatever." They weren't shaming me, and they weren't disgusted or anything like that, because that was what I anticipated, that they'd be disgusted. And anyway, so I came through. I had to have a blood transfusion, and then Matt weighed 5'2", and he is going to be 50 next year. So we both survived, and I felt like I'm gonna show the world that I'm a mom that can have a baby, go back to school, march in the marching band, and do this. And I'm gonna, everything. I'm just going to make this happen. So I think they call that survivor syndrome, but that's where I was. And I didn't know the Lord. I was going to church, but I just didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And anyway, well,
that's what I was going to ask you, is how much was your faith like a daily place? So, cause then how old are you when you have the kind of folks come and visit? And
so that was one year after that. So I stayed connected with youth group, and my mom took care of Matt while I was at youth group, and vice versa. I took care of all 4 of my younger siblings while my mom went to work the second shift. So as soon as I got home from school, she left. And I felt like I didn't know it at the time mentally that the Lord was helping me so much. But I was very successful. I was accepted into National Honor Society the next year. I was trying to make a way that, that I could show the world that a gal can do this, and then I met Jesus, 10 months later. That is when that lay witness weekend happened at our church.
Wow.
And I had this incredible Holy Spirit experience. I mean, it was like a lightning bolt experience for me. That's, it really was. And they, we want to disciple you for 6 to 8 weeks, that kind of thing. But then my circumstances did not change, but I had this joy and like a faith that I trusted the Lord that it was going to be okay, that everything was going to be okay. And I just pressed on. And it's interesting. My mom got me a Bible for Christmas a month later, and it was The Way. It's that new NLT, and I still have that. And that's the Bible that
Wait, is it the red one? Is it red?
Well, it had the words The Way.
The Way, yeah. I've seen like a version of that was like a red front cover. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I still have it, but
that's so cool.
Yeah.
And is your mom then like, this, man, I can see such a difference. This is amazing. Or does it seem like you're kind of a weird religious person all of a sudden?
So it was to everyone in the church at Johnstown, I was a weird religious person. And they're like, that was emotional. You might want to just
just relax a little, and you've been through a lot lately, and who knows what this is. And because by this point, your life's kind of on display, all the things that are happening.
Yeah. And then I had broke up with my boyfriend. My life had changed inside, but on the outside, there was all this, my mom had, or my dad had been killed in an accident. And, I was struggling, and Matt's dad was still, it was a fatal attraction. So even after we broke up, he struggled to not have me in his life. He like stalked me and, and we were in high school together. So, that was easy. And it was Johnstown. So it wasn't a very big high school.
Right. Nowhere to hide.
So,
yeah.
So it was pretty intense, but I was able to hang on to what I knew, the part that I knew from when I was discipled, but they went away after 6 weeks, and I didn't have to take the next steps. I had youth group and that was good, but it wasn't, for me, it wasn't enough. I just didn't know what to do, with the next step. What's the next step? Where do I go? So then in June of 1975, I met Roy, my husband. And it was the year before I graduated. He's 2 years older than me, so he was already out of school. But he was playing in a rock and roll band, and his best friend was in the band, and my best friend was dating his best friend. Anyway, there was all this. He wants to meet you, and they told him I wanted to meet him, and we had no idea about the other. But so it was a blind date, and we met in a pizza place in Utica, and that their band was playing in, and it really was love at first sight. June 6, 1975. So, yeah.
And how old are you then? You are?
I was 17.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and he was 19.
Right.
So it wasn't a bar; it was a pizza place. That's why I was able to go, because not always could I go, But anyway, so we started dating, and he was very connected to his church, his Methodist church, And then, and he'd never dated anyone before. So I was thinking, how am I going to tell him that I had this little boy, when I told him, he was fine with it. That's okay. I love you. I don't know how, this is cool. It's cool. But we ended up getting pregnant, or I did. And I had an abortion just quickly. I went to Planned Parenthood in Newark, and they said, you're doing great with, and you already are accepted at OSU. You already have taken some classes at Denison, all these things. So you're gonna screw that path up. So you need to just get this done quickly. And so we did. I did, like, within the next few days, and I was too far. So it was a botched abortion. So again, I hemorrhaged and ended up, having to be in the hospital and having procedure done anyway. So that was in March of my senior year.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had dated, along since June of the prior, then ended up getting pregnant, and we were already engaged. And not that that's an excuse at all, but just,
right.
We had a plan, and he had a plan for his life. And, but the abortion was pretty awful. And, I felt so much guilt and shame, and I just couldn't, I couldn't talk to anybody. Him and I talked about it a lot, and I often cry in the evenings. But that's when I started to feel that, I felt like I needed to know how to take the next steps, how to get connected to a church. And so we reconnected. We had been in church for a little bit, but we reconnected with my church in Johnstown, because we still lived in Johnstown, or we ended up living in Johnstown. And we connected there, and then got really involved. We both became elders in the Presbyterian Church. I was the clerk of session. There was all these connections, but
in the midst of all of that, are church folks intervening, going, "Hey, what happened here? Are you okay?" Or is it all kind of on the side? Like, nobody's really
on the side. Yeah, because it was just this small town. How could they do that? Now, nobody knew about the abortion part at all. Yeah. I mean, just Roy and I knew. And my mom, she thought I'd had a miscarriage when I ended up having to go back in the hospital to have the procedure done. The D&C is what they called it. And so she just thought it was a miscarriage, but she didn't engage with me at all. I mean, she just...
So you're just like alone. Like, it's you, maybe a couple friends, your boyfriend.
There were no other friends that I talked to about it at all. Okay,
so no friends, but your boyfriend, or I guess now your fiance.
Yeah.
Wow. So just completely alone.
Yeah.
Talking to whoever at the clinic.
Yeah. And it just didn't, I mean, I let them make the decision for me, really, the clinic, just like, oh, wow. You're right. I guess I better do this. And I of course regretted it ever since then. But But
that means by 18, you've had your father pass away suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
You're a teenage mom.
Yeah.
And now you have had an abortion that was traumatic.
Very traumatic, yeah.
Physically.
Yeah.
Plus you have a boyfriend stalking you.
Yeah.
And then you also have this encounter with God in the middle of the whole thing, which is just a miracle.
Yeah.
And now you're leading in a church with all of this stuff in tow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot by 18.
Yeah. Well, so we didn't start leading in the church till after we got married in 76. So I was 19, but
you were 19. Okay, my bad. Okay, so let's go crazy and say by 21,
really connected, yeah.
Right? By 21, all these things. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And so the interesting part of the, I guess there was a couple years that we did step back and not go to church all the time, but it was probably just like 3 or 4 years where I was just having these, I was just wondering, Lord, what am I doing? That's when I was working. So I worked at Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield for 23 years before coming on staff for 20. So I did really well there. I became a middle manager, managed 77 people. But I kept feeling like I know that I need to find my way, and I need to find what Jesus has for me. Just to talk about Anthem for a few minutes, I never had to terminate any of the 77 employees because I felt like no matter what they did, if I could find a good fit for them, like, because I was over multiple departments, I was just like, I'm going to find a good fit for you. And that's, so I had so much success in helping people find what I didn't know at the time, working in their gifts or their, what they were, gifted or talents were. And that's one of the other sides of my life that I'm passionate about, is helping people find where they belong and where they get, what's the best place for them to serve, what's your spiritual gifts, what's your Enneagram, those kind of things. But that's the other piece that really, I feel like the Lord has just given me a heart for. So back up a little bit. When we really got involved, got started, we're really going full force. I was probably about 22, 23. So we had a new pastor he was originally from Dayton, Cincinnati, but he knew about the Vineyard, and he took us to Wimber conferences in Columbus and behind the scenes, and then they sent our worship team to a conference in, wherever the original Vineyard was. Anaheim. Yes. Yeah. He sent that his name is Dan White, and we're still friends with him. But they came back and they were like, we got to do Vineyard music. And, wow. The church was like, no, we're old and we're not doing
I was going to say, so as a Presbyterian, he's sending you to Vineyard conferences, even all the way to Anaheim.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get to go because I wasn't on the worship team.
Other people.
He did send a lot of people. He went with us to the one we had it at, John was at Independence High School here in Columbus, or Whitehall, I guess. Anyway, but that's where we got our first taste of Vineyard and the Holy Spirit. I mean, I got a taste of it when I went forward and accepted Jesus, but I didn't experience that very much at all. What happened is that pastor, Dan, he was called to plant a Presbyterian church in Naperville. Anyway, and then the pastor that came and led after him, he was a great guy, but we decided that we needed more. And so we said, after I did my last congregational meeting, which was third week of January, and then we came to Vineyard the next weekend, and Danny Meyer was preaching.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool.
Oh, that's funny. That's amazing. Okay. So all of that's happening, and this will, of course, I know where we're headed, because I know your story and I know the ministry you lead.
Yeah.
In all of those moments, so elding, helping, connected in church, how much of the story you just told me now was part of your story? Like you're telling publicly, or
I didn't talk about it at all.
You didn't talk about it. So
did not for 20 years.
So for 20 years, you just don't talk about it? No.
Yeah. It was so, I mean, I carried it around like this trash bag, like, the weight, the shame, the guilt was awful. And Roy and I, we did talk about it some, because at nighttime, sometimes I'd cry. And then the year after we came in 95, so in 96, Rich had someone, her name was Sarah Beaumier, tell her story on Sanctity of Life weekend. And she did the whole sermon, and she did it on, what the Lord did in her life when she told her story, and she was given the grace to believe she could be forgiven and healed.
Wow.
So when I was in the sanctuary that week or that day, I thought, wow, how could I have gotten here and sat here? How could I be here? I need to get out of here because I don't want to, I just don't want to expose myself, all those things. And Roy happened to be playing on the worship team. So he came down and, sat beside me and put his hand on my leg and like, oh, okay. And then at the end, after she finished, she said, I'm going to be in the lobby. If there's anybody here that wants to talk, I have this post-abortion support group, and we have, our pro-life ministry it was just called Women for Life at that time. And that was just a small group, and we went and prayed. But so I went, Roy made me go out to the table. So she said to me, I just said, I just want to talk. And I just don't want to, I don't know if I want to come to the group. But she said, you're very clinical. I'm like, okay. But anyway, but the group was called Daughters of Rachel back then, but it was soon. And, we're gonna, you're welcome. We'd love to be with you. And she prayed with me. And, I didn't cry then because here I am in the lobby at Vineyard, and I don't want anybody to know. But I did go to the third week, because what happens each week you press in more to forgiveness. You press in more to writing these letters and forgiving people and knowing that God forgives you. And I knew that I was forgiven from the moment I accepted Jesus in 1974. But I believed if I don't mean to say it this way, but made it into heaven, but, have eternal life, I was going to be at the back of the room and nobody was going to know I was there. Like,
so you just sort of get in by
I'm there.
Yeah, by the skin of your teeth, you'll get
exactly,
in. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And so during the group, one of the things that was said by this leader, she said, for you to say it's possible for God to forgive you for this is kind of arrogant, because your sin is the only sin that he doesn't or can't forgive.
Wow.
And so that hit me like, you're right. So I felt like that was the beginning of the healing process for this abortion. But it brought me back to, I want to help other women who have been through this and help them not have to go through this. Yeah. So that's where my passion for compassionate care through Value Life, Pro-Life, it was called Pro-Life at the time. But I got so involved with the Women for Life and the mentoring piece. But I thought we can make this happen. We can make this. We need to get this out there where we can make connections with women in the city and women in kids in high school or girls in high school. So that's where the momentum started for me. Jesus like broke me free. Was it in this post-abortion support group called Daughters of Rachel? That's where I just knew. I knew that I was forgiven completely. I mean, I knew, like I said, I knew in my heart, I trusted him that I was going to make it in, but like you said, by the skin of my teeth.
Right.
But I feel like that group just led me through the steps of knowing that I know. And it's just been, it's been transformational for me. And that was 20-year point in my post-abortion history. And I've led that group quite a few times. And so many women have waited that long that have gone through the group. They've waited 20 years to get to that point of believing that the Lord can forgive them.
Because the age you are when you have this moment in the lobby or you hear the Sunday, you're 38 or so.
38. Yeah.
So it's a full 20 years.
Full
that
20
it isn't
years.
part of your public story.
No. No.
Wow. And so then, I mean, it takes a ton of courage to come through the door and go to that small group. I can't imagine.
Well, yeah, at the third week of it, which was, I mean, we were really pressing in. Roy drove me because I didn't want to go. So he drove me because we still lived in Johnstown and the group was over. The group was over in Reynolds at a pregnancy decision health center over there. But then he sat outside the door for 2 hours. And he's like the most laid back, not forceful person, but he was just like, you're going to go. I'll take you. And I said, no, I'm not going to go. And he said, yeah, you're going to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and now for all the years of work you've done, I'm sure you see even yourself differently in that the amount of trauma you're carrying around for decades. I mean,
it's crazy.
That's hard to access. I mean, that you'd build a lot of ways to get around that. So
I did. Yeah.
That's a really scary proposition to open that closet, so to speak.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, I climbed the corporate ladder at, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I was like, I'm going to show, and I don't have a degree. I mean, I've overcome so many obstacles and it just, anyway, that's, I don't put that out there that often, but it was deep. It was really deep for sure. But what happened here with the Value Life Ministry, pro-life ministry, the Lord's favor on it has just been so incredible. And I just have this passion for compassionate care. And it doesn't matter to me if you've had 4 abortions and you're pregnant. We want to care for you. We offer so much hope. And that's the one thing, or there's 2 things that sometimes women say when they call the hotline, when I meet with them in person. I have no hope and I'm so alone, even if they're not alone. Like I was not alone when I was pregnant, but I was alone in my, in my spirit, but not alone in the house. That's part of what, we want to uncover that and help them discover that, you can connect with a mentor here or a small group, those kind of things. And just, this is the place. It's a place of healing. And the interesting thing is, in the last few years, we've served more internationals. Like this weekend is the end of our fiscal year, and we've served 419 women just this fiscal year, and 65% of them are international.
Wow.
Yeah, and they, it doesn't matter the background. I mean, they can whatever religion that they have, but we want to care for them and show them that this is how Jesus loves you. And we'll ask him, can we pray for you? And, it doesn't matter their background. A lot of them will say, yeah, actually 99% of them will say, yes, please. And they can be Hindu or Muslim or nothing. And they do want it. They do accept us there. And it's so cool to hear or to see women that we've cared for who've had abortions, who weren't connected, that are now connected to the church.
Well, and from when you kind of started in at 38, so how long until then you come on staff and start making this your career? Because it wasn't right away.
So 38. So I came on staff in 99. So I would have been 47 maybe.
Okay, so it's almost 10 years later, like 9 years later.
Yeah. So it was 4 years later when I came on staff. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so I was only a volunteer. So I came on staff, but I was volunteering with the Value Life Ministry.
Got it. Okay.
For just a couple years. And then Rich was like, hey, that ministry is growing. Maybe you want to take that as a part of your resume or part of your job description. And so I was like, of course, I would love to do that because I was doing it after hours and on my lunch hour, that kind of thing.
Wow.
And we had changed leadership by that time because the gal who was leading it had left to plant a church with her husband. And anyway, so that was probably 2001 when Rich said, make this part of your portfolio and you can get paid for it. And I was just like, okay, but even if I didn't get paid, even if I didn't have an office, I'm doing it. I'm going to do this pro-life, value life thing. Moms need us. Moms need us to offer hope and care. And there's too many moms not getting what they need or not having a chance to talk to somebody that would say the things that we could say and not what the Planned Parenthoods and that kind of thing said to me.
Every month, we introduce a new book or recommended resource to dig in deeper. For September, we're recommending that you read Prophetic Lament by Soong Chan Ra. At the end of this month, we'll have an episode where Jay interviews him to dive in deeper to some of the concepts from this book. You won't want to miss it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I want to turn and hear all about the ministry, but before that, I'm sure right now, we're in the conversation we're having here, it's such sensitive water, right? Like,
it is.
There's any number of folks who could be listening to it right now that this is maybe for them, the first time they're realizing there's this huge part of my story that I've never let anybody in on.
Yeah.
Like to your point, I'm a successful executive. I'm leading in my church. I'm raising a great family.
Yeah.
And there's any number of thoughts like, well, what's the point of even bringing this up? Like, I already know I'm forgiven. I know God loves me.
Yeah.
What would you want to say to folks who, even maybe listening or going, this is like a closed room in the house of my life.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Why would I open that door? What, man, this is not something why would I even explore that? What would you want to say? Because you've now met with hundreds and thousands of women, not just your own story. What would you want to say about somebody listening and they're realizing, I think, man, you're talking to me.
Yeah. And I feel that Jesus wants to open that room up. And for me, it got opened up, and I didn't talk about it publicly. There was a prophetic word the very last meeting that we had of the post-abortion groups that Sarah Beaumire spoke over me. She saw me on a stage talking about it and sharing my story. And I was like, that will never happen. But it wasn't, but just 2 years later, I think it was 2 years later, when they asked me to speak at women's breakfast here and share my story. So I would say to men and women, because men are post-abortive as well.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband has done a post-abortion support group for some men as well. I say you have a closed place in your heart. And I wouldn't want to say that in a hard way, but Jesus wants to heal that for you. He wants to open that up and get in there and soothe your wounds, because there are wounds. There's wounds from this abortion, that the guilt and shame gets packaged up. I did a great job of teaching it all in one little place and just, showing off all the other pieces. But that was still in my heart. I was, it was a place that I felt like I thought about it every day. And that women say that go through the group that has been 20 years, that they think about it every day. And these are successful women, and women who, are, you would be surprised to know the women who've stepped out after 20 years and felt like they had to get this dark out of their heart. And, but I just feel like it's a place that Jesus wants to touch and heal, because that your heart is broken for your baby that you didn't have. And we need that. We all need that. As believers, we need those healing times in our heart to come and let the Lord just open it up. And that doesn't mean you would have to share with the world or everybody like I have.
You don't necessarily mean you're going on stage next week or something.
No.
Right. Exactly.
No. But it's a place that Jesus wants to go in with you and be there with you and sit with you and hold you and comfort you.
Well, and exactly to your point, we can know we're forgiven, and that maybe when we die or something, but boy, there's that 18-inch gap between your head and your heart.
Oh yeah.
Where you can know a thing, but not necessarily feel it all the way into your normal daily life. That's a huge part of it. And the power of a community and confession, and it's really interesting for me hearing your story too, that you were in a great church that loved you, talked to you about Jesus, but then you're in another church that, being the Vineyard, that's asking some deeper questions. It isn't just, are you forgiven and are you a part of this community, but how do we get all the way down to your real life?
Yeah.
The real things that you carry with you.
Yeah.
And that's a different way of understanding being in a church, right? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sure there's any number of folks listening who are like, well, I don't know. Am I in a church that would really want to do that?
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. I mean, I was talking to some pastors just a few weeks ago, and I was asking an older pastor in our city, I was like, so help me think about some of the pastoral things I'm seeing. And I was talking about some of these issues around, sexual health and ethics, and, younger people, older people, all seem to be dealing with this stuff. And I'm watching, the influence, the impact of pornography on marriages. And I'm talking to them about this stuff. And I said, what do you think is helpful? And here's literally what he said to me. He's been in ministry decades. He said, Jay, you don't want to turn over that rock. Because who knows what's going to crawl out from under there? Like, what's going to come out of that hole? You might not be able to get it back in the hole.
Huh.
And it struck me, like, there are pastors and churches that are saying, I don't want to know.
Right.
Which is, and I don't know that most pastors are maybe that overt, like admitting that. But boy, he was. He was like, listen, Jay, you open that stuff, who knows what happens? And it really, it at first, of course, really discouraged me because I thought, man, what are we doing then? But then it encouraged me because I thought, that's not the kind of church I want to lead. That's not the kind of church I want to be in. That's not the kind of way that I think the Vineyard wants to be. We want to be people that, because we believe in the intimate love and ministry of Jesus by his Spirit to people, that God intends to reach into every part of somebody's life. And that might be messy.
Yeah.
I mean, I bet if we went week by week of that first small group you're in, and you gave an example where you're like, I don't want to go. That isn't easy work. That isn't like up and to the right, like you're all clapping and laughing after the meeting or something. That's real
Not even
work.
close.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we don't want to, it would be unwise for us to paint a picture of how this health works as though it's all just warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
But man, it produces a different kind of freedom, a different way of knowing the love of God, of loving others. And of course, what you're saying is different ways your gifts would fire within that now leads into a different kind of ministry. So it's such a powerful story because, I mean, obviously you know this, Diane, but in my little experience pastoring, your story is not like, oh, there is that one rare person I've heard this of.
Mm-mm.
I mean, the story you have, the elements of your story are more prevalent than I think most people in ministry are aware of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so you have any number of women and men, to your point, because I have experienced that as well.
Yeah.
That are suffering in congregations.
Yeah.
Where there's worship, there's teaching, there's even prayer ministry moments. But if they're carrying these things and the Holy Spirit's starting to touch them, going, how do I even get to this? Like, is it okay for me to just bring this up in a small group? Or, do I call a pastor to have a meeting? Or is there a therapist? Or, what am I supposed to do here as I'm growing in my life with God? And so, of course, that leads beautifully into the ministry that you've been given incredible grace to lead. I'd love to hear just about kind of what it is exactly you do and what it's been, and tell me more about it.
So, gosh, like I said earlier, it started out with Women for Life was just a Saturday morning prayer group, and sometimes we'd go to and pray outside the clinics. And then from that group, we decided to have mentors. There was an engagement with a gal at a McDonald's on one of the days that we met. And the gal admitted she was pregnant. And anyway, and then that started the maybe we could help this girl. So that's how the mentoring piece started. But so that we're called Mother Heart Mentors, but the Value Life Ministry has 20, 30 mentors. But like I said, we have 419 women that we serve. Wow. So most of the women get cared for by myself and by, some staff and volunteers. But we have gone from that first year, we cared for, I think there was 7 or 8 women, to where we are this year. And this year, the numbers were a little higher. I think it was like 3 years ago, the year before COVID, we almost 700 women.
Wow.
But we have a Value Life donations where we get, the congregation gives us gently used baby clothing from newborn to 2Ts that these women, that we give them access to, or we actually gather the things together and care for them. Even if they're not with a mentor, we care for them, giving them baby clothes, diapers. And initially we give them a pack and play and a car seat, both brand new. But we care for them through the second year of the baby's life. And that includes not just the mom and the baby, but the siblings. Like we partner with a group called Read to Succeed out of New Albany, not a group, it's a large foundation. And they give us books for all ages. And so we're not just focused on the mom and the baby. We want the whole family to have a future, and we want this baby to have a stunning future and a life filled with joy, and the mom to have a life filled with joy and peace. So, I mean, ultimately, the ultimate goal would be that they would then start attending our church and that they would come to know Jesus. But that's not the initial way we approach the women.
Yeah, it's just care. How do we help? And
yeah.
And the vast majority that are coming to you are in pregnancies they don't know what to do with, or is
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And like there's two categories: abortion vulnerable, abortion bound, and then not sure what they're going to do. Like, I can't afford this baby. I know it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And the fact that I have a job that doesn't have medical leave. And here in Ohio, you can't get the reimbursement for daycare until you've been back at work for 2 weeks. So there's all these things they have to think about. And so we're just our approach is we can help you with that. We can help you figure that out. We want you to have a successful pregnancy. And the outcome we want to be good. We want to make sure you have prenatal. That's one of the first questions we ask when women call the hotline is, do you have prenatal care? And sometimes they don't. So we go ahead and help. And then this past year, well, since January, we've had 2 women that did go ahead with abortion because it was a domestic violence and they just couldn't see their way clear to have that the father of the baby be in their life for the rest of the baby's life. So in addition to this, we offer the post-abortion support as well. We connected them with a weekly support group that meets just, it's just a walk-in post-abortion support group and giving them lots of resources. So there's no shame and there's no guilt if they choose that decision. Pieces, adoption, we talk about how, could be a good choice. That's not, we don't force it on them, but we have profiles of couples who attend other vineyards or they're Christians, and we just keep those on hand in case a woman to be leaning towards making an adoption plan. And we have, at least one mentor who's been through adoption before that is really good with connecting them. And then the other part is, women who have a baby who's possibly Down syndrome. So we have a mentor who's has this really adorable 19-year-old Down syndrome boy who she's mentored at least one of the moms who was seriously leaning towards abortion because her baby had Down syndrome, and he was born and he's doing great. So that's a cool story there too. So, but that's part of what we coach women or encourage women in, that we can help you. We can help you. We have resources. We have classes in the community center. We have GED classes. Lower Lights is a low cost or no cost clinic. They're in our community, prenatal yet, but they're going to. But they have other care there, and we're connected to lots of agencies here in Central Ohio. Children's Physicians Care Connection is who we sometimes call if a gal has no prenatal care. We're just so in Central Ohio that we're sought out and referred. I mean, if women come to these places, OB clinics, that kind of thing, and they don't have anything, the social workers or nurses refer them to us to help them get what they need, and especially if they have more than just the baby in their womb, if they have other kids, because we have the food pantry. There's just so many resources that we can connect a mom to. A family, I mean, it's not always just a mom, but a family that needs resources. And we just have this very generous congregation who just really loves the Value Life ministry.
Well, and what I so appreciate about what you're saying is so much of the conversation in these arenas locates in policy. And what you're describing is care. We're trying to care. For women. We're trying to care for people that are in a really complicated, traumatic experience often.
Yes.
And you're saying, I'm sure there's any number of things to talk about with policy, obviously. And that's where the conversation tends to drift.
Oh, yeah.
But I so appreciate listening to you and having seen the ministry at a distance. And so, Diane, if there's like vineyard pastors, leaders, folks that are listening and they're going, man, my heart breaks for this. What are some steps you would imagine or recommend? Because we have churches of all different sizes, right? So, they're not going to be able, likely, the majority, to hire a staff person, right? To have a huge ministry. But what are some first steps that you think of where you're like, hey, these are folks in your congregation, or here's a way you can offer support and care to the city as a whole, or through your congregation? What are some thoughts that you have?
So the first thing that I always recommend when I'm contacted by a church is you need to find others who have a similar heart, have passion or compelling sense that we've got to do something, and you need to pray. So that's the first thing you got to do is get some people together, women, men, whoever, and pray. What's the best way for our congregation? If you're small, if you're big, whatever it is, what's the best approach for us to roll this out? And so you can't do this without a team. And it's fine if it's volunteers. It doesn't have to be a paid staff. We didn't have a paid staff for a while. But I feel like that if you and your congregation are having that compelling thing that's in your heart, there are others. So there's got to be a way to get the word out that you're feeling it. And maybe in your small group, talk about it. Or maybe if you're in a women's group, talk about it with your women. Maybe that's not what they would be compelled to, but maybe they know women who would be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I need, or that's exactly what I think we should do. So again, gathering a small group and praying, because the Value Life ministry brings you a lot of warfare. The enemy, it is always, there's always two teams on the field, obviously, but this one's one of those that around every corner, you're going to get pushback, resistance, or something crazy happens. So that's really been my experience with the with the pushback. But then the next step is you've prayed about it. You know what you want your congregation. You think you know what the Lord's saying to you about your congregation. Then you've got to present it to your pastor if he's not the one involved, and then just present it to your congregation. If you get the word out, and then there'll be others in the congregation who will say, "Oh my gosh, why didn't I know about this? I want to be a part of this ministry." Mm-hmm. And that's what happens when the rollout starts. The ministry will grow. I mean, you'll get some pushback like, "Oh, would we want pregnant girls, pregnant teens?" That's part of, sometimes that's the misnomer, because that's not the majority of the women are in their 20s or late 20s or, college age. They're not teens. Anyway, but even if they were, it doesn't matter. But that's what, you just do, roll it out to the congregation, and then just start. You can start by having a diaper drive. You can start by collecting baby clothes. But I have a playbook that, if they want to contact me, I have a playbook of next. The first one always being the prayer group, but they could contact me on how we do it, or how I would recommend you do it. Yeah. And again, it's really about considering the size of your congregation and what your scope or your ability would be as a congregation. Interesting. Sometimes you'll have people come out of the woodwork that make a huge donation, or it's just interesting how it's played out a few times when I've talked to people in the last couple of years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just anything that starts to demonstrate care. I mean, that's what strikes me so much about your story is, publicly offering a testimony and care. Yeah. Opened all the doors for you. Just saying out loud, "Hey, this might be your story and we care about you." And, that takes some guts, obviously, because that's a pretty intense Sunday experience. But, some way of just saying, there might be some of you here. And we've been trying to build an environment to pray and ask God about this. That's really powerful. That is so powerful. And I mean, you would know the statistics better than me, but it seems as though, I mean, if the statistics hold up, in most rooms, there's going to be someone who's been impacted.
Yes.
Someone, either by way of their kids or a sibling or themselves, that they'll go, "Yeah, this is like weighing on me."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't know if this was the kind of thing we're allowed to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to me on the guy side of things. It's interesting how many guys have that said, "Oh, they paid for an abortion, not for their wife, but for a girlfriend. And now, it's just stirring up this stuff, and they hadn't even told their wife." And, and so you have all those things that stir up sometimes that, that can get things cracked open, I guess. But I mean, those are things the Lord wants you to deal with, I think.
Yeah, it stays with you. I mean,
it does.
It
really does.
That's what's real, is these things stick around. I mean,
they do. Yeah.
To your point, 20 years later.
Yeah.
20 years later, you're suddenly accessing this on, a normal Sunday. You're like, "Oh, I guess we're doing this today."
Like, "Oh, why didn't I know this was happening?"
Yeah. Exactly. Well, what would be just like maybe a final word? Like, what would you want to say? We've talked to maybe a woman who is listening, isn't aware, and maybe even a guy who, maybe participate in some way, and then also maybe some Vineyard pastors. I mean, what would be ways that we can pray for you? I mean, as you're doing this work, what are the obstacles that you see in front of you? What are some ways that, you're dreaming and hoping and praying? Mm-hmm. You're going on sabbaticals. This is the right time to be thinking about these things. What are you praying for? How do we join with you in prayer in the work that you're doing?
So in the middle of my sabbatical is my 65th birthday.
Oh, so that's exciting.
I know, but I don't have on the grid yet. And my husband's 67 and he's not retiring anytime soon either. But I have this really strong sense that the Lord is opening doors for me to help other churches start Value Life, Pro-Life ministries. And because I know how many women out either are post-abortive or are in crisis pregnancies, or men who are post-abortive. And I just feel like that this is the time that we've had it all uncovered. And over the past 2 years, like I said, I've been contacted by 8 different churches, one of them not a Vineyard, but 7 others Vineyard. And I have, I felt there's just this momentum, and I feel like that the Lord is opening doors for all churches to be more welcoming of people who are struggling with guilt and unplanned pregnancies and post-abortive. And I just feel like this is where the Lord wants me right now. And you could pray that that while I'm on sabbatical, I come up with a good plan. I feel like I have a pretty good plan because I have this playbook, but I feel like there's just more that needs to happen across the United States. But the good news is 2 of the churches are, one in Belfast and one in New Zealand. So it's become global of the 8 churches that I've been contacted by. But I feel like that's what the Lord's putting on my heart. And I don't feel like it's just for this time. I just feel like this is going to be the next season of my life. And I don't know.
Well, amen. Let it be, Lord. And just, again, I mean, to imagine that Vineyard churches across the country are just offering at least awareness and care for even their own congregations, let alone, hey, you might have a friend, you might have a family member, some kind of a small group, some kind of a something. And then even to be partnered, there are groups out there that do a great job caring for folks that aren't necessarily in the church. And there's also plenty that are pretty caustic and difficult, so you have to be discerning. But,
definitely.
But I mean, what a powerful witness, what a powerful testimony. I am so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the way you've chosen to serve in your city and in the church, and your willingness to try to serve and reach out to other churches. And so, you're going to have a little break, so nobody's going to bother you for that. But maybe you'll come back to 100 requests for help. You never know. Yeah.
So you can drop my email in the.
There you go. We'll put all the ways to get to you in the show notes. But I'm super, super grateful. Thanks for making time right before you head out. I know we kind of squeezed this in, but I really appreciate it. And who knows? Maybe you'll come back to your prayers answered. Ways to do this.
Yeah.
We'll see.
The We Are Vineyard podcast is a production from the team at Vineyard USA. If you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. Leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Connect with us online for additional resources. Our website is vineyardusa.org, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at VineyardUSA. Thanks for listening. See you next week.